So I like to go walking in the cemetery near my house pretty much almost every day. This time, however, I decided I would go later than usual. It was about 7 p.m. and still pretty light out. I had my phone and pepper spray with me. As I was crossing the busy street which stood between my neighborhood and the cemetery, there was a black SUV that slowed down next to me and then said the usual catcallish kind of stuff. Being that I usually get catcalled really often, I just ignored it and expected the SUV to just keep driving once I crossed into the cemetery. Well, once I was in the cemetery, the car made a U-turn and then proceeded to head right for me near the cemetery. My heart then sank. I knew that I couldn't go back to my house because that would then entail me crossing this really busy street and potentially showing this guy where I live. As the car then drove right into the cemetery, I went and walked to one of the plots so that I could hide myself. I basically just crouched down right behind a tombstone and then prayed that he couldn't see me. The car began to slow down to a crawl and was slowly driving around just looking for me. I just stayed hidden and soon enough, the car drove away. I waited behind the grave for a while after that because something just told me to stay a little longer. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, the SUV returned. I know it was the same car because of the bumper stickers that was on the back of it. Not only was this the same SUV, but it was also back with another car. Both of the cars were just slowly driving around where I was. The driver of the car was yelling something along the lines of,
"Hey you whore, I'm gonna find you."
And let me just tell you, I was totally terrified. Thankfully, both of the cars went out of sight really far back into the cemetery. That's when I saw my chance, and then I immediately sprinted right out of the cemetery and then ran across the street. I got home safe, but I just kept replaying what could have happened to me if I had done something different. I know I wasn't hurt, but I just can't get it out of my mind what could have happened. My city has a really bad known human trafficking problem, so as you can imagine, I'm understandably pretty terrified by what could have happened. So whoever that was in the black SUV, I'm really glad you didn't succeed in whatever you were planning for me. This happened around 2004. I was 13 years old and hanging out with two of my really good girlfriends who were about the same age as me. We had went swimming at one of their houses for a while, and then we decided to go for a walk. Walks were something that we did pretty often, and we would sometimes go pretty far. This time though, we didn't really go that far at all, which I'm really glad for because we definitely needed the energy. They lived a bit down the street from our local library, and there's a cemetery right near it. The size of the cemetery was a mix between medium and large. We would wander past or through it on our adventures pretty regularly. It was starting to get dark, and we figured we should go back to the one's large house to change into our pajamas and maybe watch a movie before bed. We were almost there, walking on the sidewalk right next to the cemetery. Near the intersection where we needed to cross, there was a red light at the moment. One car then crept up right next to us. The left side of the road was on our side of the sidewalk. We were now starting to walk against traffic. Now we were trying to walk a little faster, getting a little uncomfortable that this car right next to us was keeping our pace. The car was filled with about 3 guys that were definitely much older than us. Maybe in their late 20s if I had to guess. They started to catcall us and then invite us into their car. Then one of them said,
"Come on ladies, why don't you take a ride with us?"
My one friend decided to tell them off. The men were now screaming at us, and as the light turns green, they pull right into the lane, avoiding oncoming traffic and then go right through the green light. We stopped walking because we were watching these creeps drive away from us. Nope. They bust a U-turn and then speed back towards us pretty much immediately, head on. The friend and I scream for our third friend to start running. She's an idiot and not moving, so we grab her hands and then we book it right into the cemetery. We start running as deep as we can, and then we start hiding behind the headstones. I was behind one of the headstones by myself, and my smart friend was behind another that was a couple few feet away with the other. She actually had to put her hand over our idiot friend's mouth because the stupid ass wouldn't shut up. She kept whispering that she didn't understand why we were so scared and hiding. The idiot finally kept quiet though, when she had then heard the car door slam from where we ran from. 2 of the 3 creeps from the car were now entering the cemetery. They had then started calling for us to come out. We had then heard them saying,
"Come on, we just want to have some fun with y'all."
They then started saying really disgusting things and what they were going to do to us when they found and caught us. They then began checking behind all of the headstones, making really loud noises in the hopes that we would scream and reveal where we were. I could then hear my heart just totally pounding. They were getting closer. I was thinking of all the ways that I could run and maybe how I could fight back if they catch me, but I was really scared for my friends. They were a few rows away from us when we all heard the 3rd creep then call out to them to just give up on us and to just come back to their car to complete their beer run. They had also referred to us as little sluts. I know, such class. Once they finally walked towards where they came from for a couple of rows, us 3 little sluts then ran out of the other end of the cemetery so damn fast. We ran across the street and we hid in the first bunch of bushes that we saw that seemed pretty thick enough for what felt like an hour. We wanted to make sure that they actually drove away and weren't just circling around until we emerged. After our time in the bush, we all ran back to the house and then we all collapsed behind the locked door. I have no idea what those men were planning to do with us, but I'm really glad we never found out. This happened about 2 years ago. First of all, I want to start by talking about the cemetery and the area around it. The cemetery is visually really stunning. It has a completely open area where you can see all of the graves around and into the distance. There's a spooky maze-like section with nature overwhelming the gravestones with the overgrown plants everywhere, and there's also a large church that's located at the far end of it. It's really eerie but also very beautiful at the same time. But before this incident, I never really cared about this graveyard all that much. I walked past it when having to go to meet my friends or when I took a shortcut to get home, and recently to get to college. The cemetery was next to some of the very spooky alleyways in a council estate, so you always had to watch your back whenever you walked through this place, mainly due to the constant rumors of drug dealers, muggers, and all sorts roaming that area at night. Nevertheless, the cemetery didn't really seem that interesting to me. That is, until one of my friends told me a bizarre story involving his brothers and their friends. During the night, the brothers and their friends used to play a game inside the cemetery. I don't recall my friend telling me exactly what the game was, but it's not that important to the story. They were just being typical teenagers, causing mischief to make the day worth it since the district had the excitement of watching grass grow. After about 20 minutes of doing their little game, they then began to notice something off. The guys began feeling like they were being watched or something. The atmosphere itself began to turn dark and bleak. Tension was among themselves because they knew they weren't alone anymore. And soon enough, one of the guys saw it. It was a person. This person was wearing a cloak and he was holding something. The person was crouching under the gravestones and was silently trying to move from one to the other, trying to get closer to them. Well, one of them happened to notice it and he then informed the others of the situation. They turned, all of them, and before any of the others could spit out a word, the cloaked man then began chasing them, holding a hammer-like weapon in his hands. The guy was insanely fast, according to my friend, but due to the adrenaline rush and the sport background of his opposing forces, the teenagers were faster. I don't want to make their story any longer, so I guess I'll just finish it by saying that they eventually jumped over a really large fence and they managed to escape the cloaked man. The second they jumped over, a large thud was then heard and the fence was pushed forward. The cloaked man had hit the fence with his large hammer, and he was pretty close to cracking open a skull. After that happened, they eventually got home and 2 of them told their brother, which was my friend. Now, at first, I didn't really believe this story, and neither did any of my other friends. The friend named Sam, who's the one that told me of this story, doesn't exactly lie a lot, and he seemed pretty serious when he told me. I was thinking that his brothers were just lying to him, but I thought, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna go see for myself if this cloaked man is really there, and you guys are coming with me. After about a day of presenting my friends with a little adventure idea, I began planning where we should meet and how we're going to do this quest. Suddenly my friend David sends me a text. He had already went looking for the cloaked man the night before with his friends. His encounter with the cloaked man was a little less than frantic than the other confrontation, but this time a lot more outlandish. David had went with 2 other people. When they began to get deep into the cemetery's entrance, one of the guys immediately then shouted, "Hey, no face!" Dave tried to tell him to shut up, but he just wouldn't stop. The group then carried on through the pathway, surrounded by dead people, until they reached a shed. It was large. David and the others hid behind a bush, and then they saw him. The cloaked man was inside the shed. He was examining his weapons. Apparently a large hammer, a rusty-looking wrench, and a really decaying machete. Eventually he stopped and went out of his shed and entered the church. Unexpectedly, the church bell was heard, loudly. The guys watching don't really know what the hell's going on, but the bell is ringing for a pretty good minute. The bell is, strangely enough, ringing in some weird kind of pattern. Dave tells the others to get up and go back to another spot. They hide behind a bench this time, being further away from this strange church. Then the cloaked man comes out of it, looking concerned and ready to attack them. He has an axe out. Panic then rushes through everyone behind the bench, making everyone involved to quickly agree to get the hell out of there. They try to sneak out of there, but David keeps his eyes on the cloaked man. What the cloaked man does will give my friend various amounts of what the hell kind of thoughts forever. The cloaked man then stops dead in his tracks, and then he just falls to the ground. What's he doing? He's crawling around the gravestones very rapidly, going from one to the other. However, he's not just doing that alone, he's also making noises. The cloaked man is then spewing out growling-like sounds and begins to conquer the frigid, emotionless graveyard. Then abruptly, he then gets up and then he smashes one of the gravestones with his axe without any reason whatsoever. And then he lets out a really haunting scream up to the skies, and again without any reason. David at this point pretty much says screw hiding, and they all run away. The cloaked man doesn't chase them, just looks into the distance. When he finally finished his story of discovering more about the cloaked man, I thought that there would be no point in going there now. We all know that this cloaked man is a freaking weirdo that preys on teens and poor short-lived gravestones. I mean, what else could you really find out? Well, I'm really big on adventure, so I thought that me, David, Sam, and many of the others should go and explore a little bit more and see what we could find out. I just really wanted to see what else this guy does. So a few days later, we have our team. It was me, Sam, David, Charlie, and Mike. Charlie's just a fat slob, and Mike, well, he's the witty one of our group. So we all decided to meet up at the local tube station at daytime. Yeah, we were going to go at nighttime at first, but everyone wussed out, so we went during the middle of the day instead. We slowly began to walk through the empty alleyways and the council houses until we got to the gates, which were locked. We then jumped over, and that's when we began our adventure. Sadly, Charlie and Mike just weren't having it and climbed back out. They weren't going to go anywhere though. They were just going to wait for us. We wanted them to come with us, but after about a minute, we just left them and we walked through the large pathway with the gravestones all around us. 20 minutes went by. Nothing was happening. Instead of going straight to the shed, we decided to take another route. All of us had went through the claustrophobic maze-like section where all of the gravestones were pretty much just covered with plant vines. We began walking around and we began arguing amongst each other. Sam was really bored and wanted out. Dave didn't really care that much, but I wanted to go back to the open and try and find the shed and church. About 5 minutes of pointless arguing later, and we suddenly hear footsteps. We began looking around. Nothing. "Dude, get your phone out," Sam says to me. "Alright man, wait a sec," I reply. So I get my phone out and unlock it and I go to the camera. I'm pointing at the remoteness with my iPhone, but nothing is lurking in the distance. At least, not in our vision. We knew someone was near us, so we began to frantically walk right through this maze. Sam wants me to begin recording, so I decide to do just that. Since nothing was happening again, the recording just becomes a really dragged out video of us just walking around like idiots and then looking in every direction. I switched the damn phone off at this point, and we just begin to go deeper into the cemetery. It gets darker and darker and tighter and tighter. Then I see it. The cloaked man is following us. I finally saw him. It was when I looked behind and I noticed that he was hiding behind a huge angel statue. He was ridiculously close to us. "Guys, I see him behind us. Let's get the hell out of here," I'm shouting. "Are you sure?" says David. David, being the pretty confident and curious guy of our group, then walks back and actually tries to catch the guy. Now, I didn't want this crazy guy to pop out and get us, but I wasn't going to leave my friend. So we all went behind the statue. He was gone. Sam got pretty paranoid and he wanted us to get out. He had a really crawly feeling that the cloaked man was staring at us. But we just continued on being the idiots we were, and that's when I spot him again right on the other side. He was a little bit further away from us this time, so I wasn't as scared, but I could definitely see him trying to get closer, blending in horribly with the trees. I started freaking out. David and Sam had noticed something moving, so we ran about 30 feet away and trying to hide. The cloaked man was now going in the other direction, and he entered the church, which was pretty noticeable where we hid. Then we heard those bells. David had confirmed that those bells were the same ones he heard the other night. Then the cloaked man came out and with his really huge axe. Without any hesitation, he charged at our direction. Let me just clarify the locations by saying that we were still in the maze-like area of the cemetery, but we could still see the open area in the distance where the gravestones and church were at. So he was far away but charging our direction. He knew where we were. Even though we were hiding and nowhere near him, he still knew our location. He didn't change directions or anything. He just sprinted in one line with his axe in both hands. When I realized that he was getting closer and closer to us, I then yelled, "Run!" and we booked it. We ran, and when I looked behind, he was right there ready to swing at us. We didn't want to split up, so we ran around the maze until we finally found a pathway with large hedges on the side. There was no going back. We all ran through the path, but after running down this path, I was beginning to have a heart attack. When I looked in front of me, I felt so much fear. I was already beginning to lose hope. It was a dead end. Me and my friends were greeted by a locked shed at the end of the path. There was no way to get inside of it and no way to climb on top of it. We had the feeling of dread just totally taking over our bodies. We waited a few minutes and surprisingly, the cloaked man didn't come. We silently went the other direction and we stumbled back over the overgrown plant gravestone maze. We looked everywhere, finding broken tombstones and ripped up branches all over the place. There was silence for about 10 minutes when we looked in every direction again, hoping the cloaked man was gone. All of us were sneaking around until we finally got out of the maze, and the claustrophobic feeling of that horrible area then disappeared. The mundane gray clouds that had suddenly appeared made the open cemetery look even more disturbing and bleak than it already was. As we continue to walk on, we then hear a thunderstorm and it sounds like it's going to rain. We try and jog out of there when we then look and then see something sticking out. Holy crap! We see the cloaked man right in the distance with his hood off, standing right on top of a gravestone. His face was visible, but not exactly. For some weird reason, he was wearing some kind of cliché Halloween mask. We then stare at him for about 20 seconds, before he then goes down and then he begins crawling again. Crawling right in our direction. Screw that, we ran until we jumped over the fence. What? Charlie and Mike weren't there. The bastards must have got bored and left us, but I guess we can't really blame them. After all of that happened, we were so freaked out that we decided to never go to that cemetery ever again. We eventually made it home and that was it. The next day though, I walked through a street and I noticed the cemetery on the left side of it, and I then saw red tape and then police inside of the graveyard right next to the church. I really wish I would have asked the police officer what was going on there, but I was just way too freaked out to ever go back there, even with the police there. I never did find out what happened there, and now that I think about it, I don't really think I want to know. There were apparently rumors that the guy that was stalking and chasing us was really just the caretaker wearing a mask, and that he was really just trying to scare people who went to the graveyard just to mess around. So the police investigation probably has nothing to do with the cloaked man. At least, I really hope not.